name's Jordan and I'm here to tell you my story, why I'm a Christian, why I believe in Jesus and how I came to find Jesus. So it all starts when I was really young. I was about 3 years old and my mum and dad split up, and that meant I had to move. So me, my mum and my sister, we moved into a flat and we moved across the road from a church. Now, the church doesn't really play a big part until I'm a bit older, but between the ages of like 3 and 7, I felt very disconnected from father figures, from males in general, to be honest. I didn't have, other than my granddad, I didn't have anyone male to look up to. I struggled with male authority. I had a male teacher at school for my first years at school, and I really struggled with him, and that definitely links back to my father leaving when I was so young. And I actually haven't seen him much throughout my childhood, but that's something I've come to peace with, and I have given over to Jesus as I've got older. But so coming back to church, my neighbour downstairs, she used to help at the kids club that they ran, so that was every Friday night. And as a 3-4-year-old, I could see out the window that all these people were going into the building on a Friday night, and I really wanted to be involved. I wanted to be there, but I wasn't old enough yet. I had to be 5. So eventually my 5th birthday came, and my neighbour from downstairs, she came knocking on my door. She was like, "Jordan, it's your turn, let's go across the street." And I was so excited. And when I got there, it met my expectations and more. We played games, we sang songs, we made crafts, and there was always competitions between the boys and the girls, and that just fulfilled a competitive nature in me that really needed to be fulfilled at that age. It was just so fun, and each week we'd learn Bible verses through something called a memory verse, and even now I can recall Bible verses I learnt when I was 4, 5, 6, 7, all the ages. So I'd go to kids club every Friday night, term time, and I'd just loved it. I was learning Bible stories, learning Bible verses, and then eventually my sister came with me when she was old enough, and we just loved it. We found a community, we found friends, we found people that we could see every week, and it was just such a nice place to be. And then they also ran holiday clubs, so we'd go to that during half term, and honestly, it was just the best place to be. It was the highlight of our week, the highlight of our half terms. We always wanted to be there. And I was so excited to go to their summer camp, because obviously they talk about it a lot at kids club, and all the older kids were like, "Summer camp's the place to be." And I was so excited. And it was the first time that I ever went away by myself. It was the first time I ever left my mum and my sister at home. I was going completely by myself, and I was quite a independent child. I was quite driven by my own mind, shall we say, and I couldn't wait. I couldn't wait for the independence. I couldn't wait to be by myself. I couldn't wait to do something for myself. So packed up all my things, got my sleeping bag together, my all my stuff, and I went off to summer camp. And I just remember it was the second night of summer camp, and it was the evening meeting, and I was just listening to Sarah Webber speak, and she said, "Would anyone like to invite Jesus into their life? Would anyone like Jesus to be their friend and to be with them and to be with them always?" And in that moment, I just felt Jesus. I felt a presence that I couldn't ignore, I couldn't deny. And so when she asked that question, I put my hand up and I invited Jesus into my life. I said sorry for my sins, and I said, "Jesus, I want you to be with me forever. I want to be friends with you. I want this to be my existence." That was the moment I gave my life to Jesus. It was very tangible. I can recall what I was wearing. I had a pink t-shirt on. I can remember exactly. And I was so excited to tell my mum and my sister. So when I got home, I told my mum and my sister, and they were kind of excited for me, but because they didn't really know what it meant, they couldn't pour into me in the same way that kids club and other things did. So I started going to Sunday school on a Sunday at church, and for my mum, it was kind of a bit of childcare. She would she would send us across the road to church. So I lived this side of the road and the church was this side. And she would literally walk us down the steps of the flat, watch us cross the road, watch us go into the building. And then an hour and a half later, she'd be stood waiting for us so we could leave the building and go home again. And my sister came to Sunday school with me and we just had, again, the best times. And it was sitting in the service that I really felt part of something bigger, because there was more than just children at Kids Club. There was all the generations. There were older people that, again, week in, week out, they'd ask me how I was, ask Becca how I was, and we'd just sit as a part of this community learning about Jesus. And it was just so interesting for me and such a formative part of my early childhood and early living for Jesus. And we'd take communion each week, and my sister asked me once, why are we doing this? And I said to her, I think it's a snack break. And for a while I thought it was a snack break, and then it was about a year later, I was about 8, that I remember hearing what communion actually is. And in that moment I felt like the peace of Jesus like no other, because I learned that he died for me, for my sins, and that he was a perfect man. He did no wrong, but he went to the cross, which is a brutal, horrible death, and he took on my sins. And as an 8-year-old, the idea of sins wasn't as foreign to me as it should have been. For children, I think they understand right and wrong. They definitely understand right and wrong, but the idea of them being a sinful person is quite a foreign concept. But in that moment, I understood completely that I am a sinful being, but through Jesus, I can be perfect and whole and clean with him. And by giving my sins to him, I can have a relationship with him. And so at 8, I remember that happening, and then I remember turning to my sister and go, we take communion. It's not a snack break. We take communion to represent Jesus's body. And I started to learn more. And a couple of months later, I think, there was teaching on baptism. And from that moment on, I wanted to be baptized. I remember seeing a baptism after the teaching of baptism and realizing they weren't just mucking around in water having fun, that it was actually another moment where they met with God. And that's what I wanted. That's what I was looking for. I wanted to meet with God. So I remember going home to my mum and saying, Mum, please, can I be baptized? And her response was no. I nagged and I nagged, but she was like, no, I don't know what this church is. I don't know what baptism means. And I said to her, I was like, well, you need to come to church and you need to find out and you need to ask, because I want to be baptised. And I was quite relentless. And at the time, she was only coming to church with me and my sister on occasions, so Mother's Day and Christmas. And if we're going to sing a song in the service or something, she'd come and see us. But she wasn't going to church. She wasn't a believer of Jesus herself. But eventually, my nagging to wanting to be baptised led her to coming to church. And again, that led her to finding Jesus for herself. So actually, very beautifully, when I was 10, so a couple of years later, me, my sister, and my mum all got baptised on the same day, on a very cold January morning. I was 10. And again, that was a moment where I met God tangibly. I felt him. I was very aware of his presence. Now, the morning I got baptised, I couldn't say a word. So before you get baptised, you're meant to make a declaration of why you're doing it. And so much shyness just came over me. And that wasn't usual for me as a child. I was quite loud and bravacious and outgoing. I was a dancer. I did lots of dancing. But that morning, I couldn't get any words out. So Sarah Webber had to read why I wanted to be baptised. And it was then, as Sarah was reading it, that I felt, a joy and a peace from God, that I was not doing the right thing, because I already knew I was doing the right thing, but that I was in the right place, and that I just felt his comfort. I just felt his comfort. And then I was baptised and I've felt his comfort ever since. And then let's go forward a little bit. When I was 11, I went back to summer camp. So I went to summer camp every year. So I've been baptised and then went to summer camp that summer. And I was filled with the Holy Spirit. And that happened because, again, Sarah Webber was up the front and she was talking about the Holy Spirit, saying that the Holy Spirit is a part of God. And I was like, oh, what? There's another part of God? Like, that's so exciting. I wanted to know more. I wanted that other part of God. I was like, if there's more, I want it. And so when she asked who would like to be filled with the Holy Spirit, I was there, I was up, I was practically running to the front. And I had a very physical encounter with the Holy Spirit. I don't always have physical encounters with the Holy Spirit, but this first time I did. I had pins and needles in my hands and feet. I was very hot and I was crying, and I like lots of tears, but they weren't sad tears. They were tears of like peace and wholeness and a joy that couldn't be explained, because my life wasn't an easy life. We struggled a lot. So to have a peace that like transcends like what was going on for me was really what kept me following Jesus. So from that moment, from 11, it was that I sought after the peace, and in moments of like struggle and in hard times, it was the peace I always came back to. So it's that has kept me, or that's one of the things that has kept me believing in Jesus, because I have had many situations where I should be downhearted, I should be sad, and I am downhearted and I am sad when those things are happening, but I also have an overwhelming sense of God and his authority over situations and of his mighty name over situations, and I know that I can ask the Holy Spirit to come and help me in those situations. And one of those situations in particular, I was 16 and my grandmother was dying of cancer, and my mum and her mum didn't have the best of relationships, so it was a hard situation for a 16-year-old to be in between, and also watching she was my favourite person ever, to watch her disappear was really hard. But each day I remember getting up, I remember praying for her, praying for healing over her body. And most of all, I remember praying for peace. I remember praying for comfort, to be comforted by him. And I can honestly say, I'm crying now, but I can honestly say that is my testimony, that is my story over that whole situation. Because I know myself, and I know that had I not had his peace and his comfort in that situation, I would have done a 360 with my life. I would have turned completely the other way. I would have rebelled really hard. I would have done crazy things. I know I would have. But having his peace and having a revelation of who he was, and that he's my friend and my comforter, is what kept me with him, is what kept me knowing him, which is what kept me seeking after him. And actually seeking his will for my life is what's led me to where I am today. So today I work for a church, I work for Harbour Church, I'm their youth worker, and that is a calling upon my life from God. That's what He's anointed me to do. So, and I believe that full-heartedly, and I see the fulfillment and the blessing of that weekly, day in, day out. Every Friday night, the building behind me is filled with young people that want to come and know Jesus. And if you just ask Him into your life, if you say, Jesus, come be with me, He'll come and He'll be with you, and He'll be with you forever. I urge you, find Jesus, because He's great. He's the best. Thank you for listening.